When was the last time that you had a full conversation with your partner that had absolutely nothing to do with the wedding? I recently planned my wedding. It took 1.5 years. It was a decision to take some time to plan it. At that time, we found ourselves either stuck talking about work or wedding. Between Nick and I, we had one full time job and two part time jobs. It was pretty consuming because these two part time jobs that we had for a client, we basically worked together. So during meal or time that we have together, we found ourselves just talking about our work, either ideas to pitch to the client or new stuff that we think would be helpful for us to use for our client. And as you know, if you are in the middle of planning a wedding can be a full-time job on its own. That's exactly what happened. We ended up having 4 jobs between the two of us, even though we had a wedding planner. It's as if wedding planning is a work meeting. So we just end up with this exhaustion. To be honest, it put us as far as it can be from wedding vibe and get us closer to just survival vibe, because we are trying to make this happen so badly. We end up in this sensitive bubbles that with a little poke of a finger it could burst. So if you feel like planning your wedding right now feels heavy, feels daunting, or you just started planning and you want to make sure that you can protect your relationship and carry through the planning process without changing what you have with your partner in a bad way, you are in the right space. In the last episode, we built your pre-wedding flight, where we essentially identify what do you want to feel during your wedding day, how can you identify between your wants and your needs, what's worth fighting for, what's your non-negotiable. And in this episode, I want to share some framework that I found really helpful to either prevent escalation or de-escalate when we plan the wedding. If you know, you know. Today, we're building your safety briefing. I want to preface this, preface. I want to preface this with a disclaimer that I'm not a therapist. I am not a wedding planner. I am just someone who recently planned a wedding and have learned so many lessons about being in committed relationship, about becoming, about my sense of self, that I wish I could have this in the beginning of my planning. And I couldn't for the life of me find a single piece of content that talk about what wedding planning do for us. What's the process? Essentially is cooking us together to be able to graduate as a married couple. So I started making it. This is the Heart Experiments. If you are new, welcome. In this episode, I essentially want to talk about 3 agreements that will keep you on the same theme, because it's so easy to forget that it's not about you versus them. It's about you and him or you and her versus the problem. And you are one team trying to make this one project happen. I want to start with the most foundational one, that is knowing exactly when planning is not allowed to fly. I call this the ground rules. My husband and I, we have started to touch on this conversation way back before we started planning the wedding. We call it the map. It's essentially things that we kind of warn each other on. For example, I would tell him I'm pretty moody. Everybody around me, my family, my close friends, my childhood friends, they have told me that I'm pretty moody. So then we set a gameplay of what can he do that would be helpful for me when I'm moody. We would built on those maps. How that kind of apply to the wedding planning and why it's important is because I found that some conversations start to feel like ambush. I would start feeling very sensitive and insecure when he asks a simple question like, have you replied to this vendor's text? Or have you shortlist the core vendor that you want to talk to? It's a very simple question and it shouldn't carry that much emotional charge, but it creates such a discomfort in me that it becomes a cycle. Like I get uncomfortable. I was dreading the time that he would ask those questions. My body is creating such a discomfort over the task. I keep procrastinating. I keep delaying doing the task, and then it just keep getting worse. On the other side, for him, when he asked those questions, it's just to check in whether I would need a support from him or whether he can do something to shorten the duration of the task. It wasn't about demanding why the task is not done yet, but it doesn't feel like that for me. Be it because maybe that whole day I've been dealing with vendors' text or I've been getting too much in my head over option A versus option B, so that his little question become like an additional mental load that essentially broke the plate. There's no way for him to know that context because we haven't touched down on that. So we figure that we needed to create a protected space where we wouldn't talk about wedding. Because remember, at that point, that's all we can talk about. It's either the wedding or the work. So we agreed that on dining table, when we have our meal, let's not talk about the wedding. Funnily enough, I know that it's a little counterintuitive because I've heard so many people says, "Oh, make it a date, make it fun, go out one night and have a nice meal, do something fun while you plan the wedding." And we did end up doing that. But we also had to make an agreement where we have one date that we do not talk about wedding at all, or we have one meal where we do not catch up on work or on our day or on the wedding. And it was hard in the beginning, but it was so helpful because then we know that whatever discomfort that I'm feeling, that he's feeling because of our work, because of wedding planning, like it won't bleed into this protected space. In that space, I'm not planning a wedding, he's not planning a wedding. We're just back to Beth and Nick. We're just dating. We're just going through one meal, having a nice conversation about our relationship, about our family, about the dream vacation that we want to take. It was a fun experiment because for Nick, it's so hard because he's so excited about it and he's so extroverted. So that's all he wanted to talk about. But he tried to understand where I'm coming from because I needed this protected space. It's like a relief for me. Another thing that would be included in the ground rules as well is to agree on what's off limits when things get heated. That means for us, no name calling, no raised voices. I am someone who just hate loud noises around me. So I'm easily startled by loud noises. I don't like it if someone express their anger like throwing stuff or slamming the door and all of that stuff. So that was part of my ground rules. We also try to avoid words like always or never. That is pretty triggering, I think, for everyone. I would also be very mindful of our old wounds or things that we are trying to get over. I think the nature of being in an intimate, committed relationship is that you know so much about the other person down to the point of what's they consider ugly in them, what they're insecure about, what they're still trying to heal from, even down to the things that they're not aware of. I would be very, very mindful over touching that. And we know as girls, girls can be mean, girls can use words like no other. So, with that awareness of power, I was really careful over expressing myself when things get heated. So, ask yourself, what space do you want to protect? Can you protect one meal a day where you don't talk about wedding planning? Or can you do out of the 4 dates of talking about the wedding planning, can you do one that is not wedding planning? What do you think would be unacceptable for you to do when you guys are emotional? It's important to decide now when you are not emotional because it gives you space to think clearly of what is ideal. You won't be able to always do what's ideal or what should have been done, but it's kind of like shoot for the star, land on the moon type thing. If you're not even aiming for the star, you won't land on the moon. So you have to have an idea of how you would want to deal with situation. How do you want to behave in certain situation, and how do you want your partner to be able to behave? That's why I think it's really important to set ground rules. So you've protected your time and you know what's off the table in a fight, but what happens when you're in it? That's where the second part of the briefing come in. I'm someone who's really, really into self-awareness and being aware of what's happening with myself, with my thoughts, with my mindset, and how I can behave better each time. Even then, it's still hard for me to react or reframe when I'm in the middle of it. I have come a long way since then, but I was a pretty avoidant person. Since then, I have been trying to find a way to be better at confronting things that makes me uncomfortable. But back in the days, I would feel overwhelmed. I wouldn't know what that's called or how to deal with that feeling. I would just freeze. I either resorted to I don't know, or I wouldn't say anything. I would leave the room. I would just shut down. So I think it's important to understand what's your version of overwhelmed look like from the outside. What's your partner overwhelmed look like from the outside? That way you would understand what to do, or you would understand how to identify that when it happens, instead of thinking that the other person doesn't care or that the other person is pushy and doesn't understand where you're coming from. You would be able to meet them where they're at, which is really important. I found that at the beginning, I thought I just had to communicate better, but trying to communicate better in the moment doesn't work. You can't logic your way out once you're activated. For me, what's helpful in the moment was a signal word. At one point, we were just so into it and we were just like going back and forth at each other, but I was so tired that I just stop punching and wave a white flag. I kept saying, I just want it to stop. I just want all of this to stop. I don't want you to get to that point. I think we can all stop from getting to that space if we just have an emergency brake that we could just slap it and everything stops. Meaning everything goes back to level one. For us at that time, whoever remember first should offer or ask for a hug, whether you need it or whether you don't need it. If things get escalated way quicker than it normally is or than what you think it should, the protocol is that you should ask for a hug. And to this day, we still have that as our Mayday protocol. Whoever see the other person escalating would then ask if they want a hug or if we can hug them. What that does is really bring us physically closer, because at that point in time we are not mentally closer whatsoever, we are not emotionally close. So whatever can get us closer, whatever doorway that we can step through and get us closer, we should do that. physically, that was like the easiest shortcut to be closer. You can just hug each other and you're physically closer. You feel each other's heartbeat. You remember who you're talking to. You were breathing next to each other and you were like co-regulating. We would go from 100 to 0 real quick. It's kind of hard, right? If you are in this emotional state, sometimes you just don't want to back down. Sometimes you feel like you want to charge and charge and charge. And you are asked to physically stop and breathe, pause, get out of our current state of mind and move to a different state. Another thing is to pause. Sometimes a hug is not just gonna do it. Sometimes you wouldn't feel like getting a hug, and that's okay too. You need to be able to verbalize that you need space, you need time, and when are you planning to revisit this? Whoever needs space and time has the obligation to also come back, to signal to the other person that they're coming back. As uncomfortable as it is, give each other space, give each other time, not talk about it, or maybe not talk at all for an hour or two. Take a walk, take a shower, eat, do your own thing, and then we would come back and we would talk about what happened. Now that you know how to essentially pull the emergency brake through your Mayday protocol, I want you to think through what happens next. I like to call it the debrief. I fully believe that it doesn't matter whether you are fighting or not with your partner. Every couple is going to fight. What matters is whether you're able to fully repair from that fight. I think sadly, most of the time, what happens with people is that you're fighting and then you apologize and you think that everything's fine, that you have gone back to level 0. But there's really either some unspoken expectation still in the air, or some hurt or resentment that we just haven't gone over with. That doesn't make us go to level 0. It keeps on a level 5. And then next time there's escalation going, instead of going from level 0, it's going from level 5. So I don't want you to confuse apology with repair. It's a start, but oftentimes, even if the other person has apologized, or even if when you have apologized, the hurt feeling doesn't go right away. The anger doesn't really go away right then and there. And that's fine. That needs to be recognized, that sometimes it just takes time and it takes patience from both ends. I think it's always helpful to name what actually happened and not just say, I'm sorry, we fought. You actually have to be able to own your part and call it for what it is. I often say, I think I came into the discussion with my own lens, that I'm not hearing what you said the way that you intended the message to be, and that caused me to escalate, or it was childish of me to say it this way. I think the easy way to go about it is you would want to do a physiological reset first, and that's where the hug comes to play, and really helpful in doing that, because you can't really repair while your nervous system is still pretty activated. If you're still feeling pretty raw about each other, you can't really start the process of repair. So that needs to fully calm down first. All of your guards and all your defenses needs to stand down. You need to recognize that you guys are the love of each other's life. There's no need on pointing guns at each other. And once you do that, another helpful tips would be to start with what you are grateful for, or to start with what you think the other person is doing right. What that looks like in practice is, I would tell Nick, I really appreciate that you're holding on the conversation, that you're being really patient with me as I'm trying to find the words or the label of the feeling that I'm feeling. I think you're great because I can see you're trying to take a deep breath and not freak out on me. So, on top of helping your person with their defense mechanism and signaling that we are not here to attack. It also helps you and take you out of your own head and things into perspective, center your attention into something else other than yourself. I think I always find that really helpful. Be calm, get your nervous system deactivated, and then start with what you think the other person have done right or have been helpful. Last thing I would say, and it's very important, is to own your part and make a small plan forward. Because you can't just say, I'm sorry that I yell at you, and then leave it at that. You have to realize and you have to verbalize and acknowledge that I'm sorry that I yell at you. I can tell when I yell that I hurt you so much. Or I can tell that when I do this, it hurt your feeling. And I love you so much. I obviously don't want to hurt your feeling. So I'm going to try my hardest to catch myself when I'm about to explode or when I think things are about to explode and do our Mayday protocol. Or, yeah, take some space, take a deep breath, not call you in a certain way. Make a small plan forward. It doesn't have to be this giant gesture of like, I'm not going to do it again. I swear to God, like, we know we're all human. We know we're all going to make mistakes. We know that sometimes we'll try our best to not do something that will hurt our partner, yet we unintentionally do it. So it's not the fact that we need to be perfect, or we need to do perfectly by our partner. I think more important than that is just we need to signal to the other person that I see the effect of what I'm doing. I recognize that. I regretted that. I'm going to try my hardest to make sure that you never have to feel this way because of this action ever again. And if in my effort of doing that, I still do that, whether it's intentional or intentionally, I hope it's not intentionally because now I know what it costs you. I hope that you can give me the grace and I hope you can give me the space to grow and I hope you can keep believing in me. So that is what the debrief is for. That is for us, the couple, together repair the stretch or the tear that we cause and move forward. So when you put all these three together, you don't just have a plan for surviving wedding planning. You have the early blueprint of how you will handle conflict, how you handle hard things as married couple. I cannot believe how much the wedding planning process has been really helpful in us figuring out this part of our relationship and us figuring out how to work with each other and how to help each other be the better version of themselves. At the end of the day, I really believe that you don't need a perfect plan. You don't need a perfect blueprint of each other. You just need a shared ones. You just need to make sure that whatever map that you're building, your partner has an equal share in that. Your partner has an equal space in drawing out and mapping out themselves, and you know their territory as much as they know your territory, and you guys are building your territory together and you're building your SOP together, right? So that's what I want to share today. If not anything else, I want you to remember that wedding planning is not just planning a day. It is a beautiful day. It is a day to remember, but also the process of doing that was really a classroom for your relationship, and you can learn so many things out of the planning process. Today, you have learned your own safety briefing, you learn how to build it, you started from creating the ground rules of the time where you don't want to talk about wedding planning, what's off limit when you guys are fighting, and then you go on and build your Mayday protocol where you, during your calm time, build out scenario of what each other could do and help identify what overwhelmed look like, because you are gonna be overwhelmed at some point. And it just be really helpful if your partner knows that it is overwhelm coming to the door and they need to manage that. On top of that, you also learn about your debrief and how to come back from fighting and conflict back to loving space, back to talking to the love of your life. I hope that this little knowledge and this minuscule lesson that are simple really, but I know it's harder in practice, would be helpful for you even if you're not planning a wedding, even if you are not in relationship. I love learning about this because it's also teaching me so much about myself. Let me know in the comment what word would you use for your Mayday protocol and how you would craft your emergency brake. I am curious to know if this is something that you already practice or if this is something new for you. And thank you so much for checking in. I'll talk to you again next week.